All right, let's get right into it. The Supreme Court just dropped a bombshell decision, and it's all about PhilHealth's money. We're talking about the Pimentel versus the House of Representatives case. This is a story about big money, big power, and the hard lines drawn by the Constitution. 89.9 billion pesos. Just take a second and let that number sink in. That staggering amount is at the absolute center of a constitutional showdown that pitted our government against the financial security of our national health insurance. And that really brings us to the core question here, doesn't it? It's a question that gets to the heart of public trust and the rule of law. So let's break down how we even got to this point. To really get what the Supreme Court decided, we have to first understand how this huge transfer of money was even put into motion. And you'll see, it was a really fast chain of events that kicked off a huge legal fight. So it all started back in 2024 with this little clause tucked away in the national budget, the General Appropriations Act. They called it a special provision, and it basically gave the government the green light to take what it called excess funds from state corporations. And wow, things moved quickly. By April, the Department of Finance had the rules written. And just a few days after that, boom, the order came down for PhilHealth to hand over 89.9 billion pesos. So what was the official reason? Well, they said it was to pay for things like infrastructure and other social projects. On the surface, maybe that sounds like a good idea, but legally, this move was about to set off some major constitutional alarm bells.
And this is exactly where the government's plans started to wander into really dangerous territory. See, this case wasn't just about moving money around. It was about breaking the fundamental rules that are supposed to protect our public funds.
The first big red line is something called a special fund. The Constitution couldn't be clearer on this. When money, like from sin taxes, is collected for one specific thing, in this case, healthcare, it can only be used for that one thing. You can't just grab health funds to go build a highway. It's a protected pot of money. And the second major violation, it's a concept called unconstitutional augmentation. The easiest way to think about it is this. When Congress passes a budget, it's like they're putting money into a series of locked boxes, each one labeled for a specific agency. The Constitution says the executive branch can't just pick the lock on one box and move money to another. It's a non-negotiable check on the power of the purse. Justice Hernando, in his opinion, did not hold back at all. He called it blatant constitutional abuse. He wanted to make it crystal clear that this was way beyond just a bad policy idea. This was a violation of the highest law of the land. So you might be asking, how in the world did the government think they could get away with this? Well, their whole argument rested on a very shaky and, as the court later found, a totally flawed way of calculating PhilHealth's excess money. Okay, this part is really telling. The Universal Health Care Act is super specific. It says PhilHealth must use actuarial science. That's basically a sophisticated way of forecasting financial risk to figure out how much money they'll need for 2 full years of future expenses. But what did the Department of Finance do instead? They just took a simple average of what was spent in the past, which completely ignores all future risks, like, say, another pandemic. And just look at the difference. It is absolutely staggering. PhilHealth's own experts calculated they needed over 560 billion pesos in reserves. The DOF's simplistic math, barely 280 billion. So, by creating this artificially low number, they basically invented a fictional surplus out of thin air and then ordered PhilHealth to hand it over. And here's the kicker. The law itself basically puts up a giant stop sign. It says in no uncertain terms that no portion of the reserve fund can be taken for the government's general fund. It's for healthcare, and that's it. Full stop. So how did such a clear line get crossed? Well, the Supreme Court didn't just stop at the transfer itself. They dug a little deeper and found a bigger, systemic problem that allowed this to happen in the first place. And it's a controversial budget tool called unprogrammed funds. And listen, this isn't some new worry. This is a quote from the Senate all the way back in 1989. For decades, lawmakers have been warning that this was a ploy, a backdoor that lets the government budget for money that it doesn't actually have yet, which, as you can imagine, can lead to some serious financial trouble. So, after laying out all of these violations, constitutional, legal, you name it, the Supreme Court was ready to deliver its verdict. And it was a big one that's going to change how the budget is made for years to come. The court just dismantled the entire thing, piece by piece. That special provision in the budget, unconstitutional.
The court called it an illegal rider, which is basically something snuck into a law that has nothing to do with the law's main point. The DOF circular, gone. The transfer of the money, unconstitutional. And then, in a truly massive decision, the court struck down the entire practice of putting these unprogrammed funds in the annual budget in the first place.
But, saying the transfer was illegal is one thing. Now you've got a new problem. How do you get back the 60 billion pesos that was already taken and put into the National Treasury? And this part is just fascinating, constitutionally speaking. The court made it clear you can't just have the executive branch order the money back. That would be the same mistake all over again. The only legal way to do it is through Congress, which holds the power of the purse. So even though the transfer was void, the cash is sitting in the Treasury. That means Congress has to pass a brand new law, a specific line item in the 2026 budget to officially send that money back where it belongs. It just goes to show that even when you're fixing a mistake, you have to follow the rules of the Constitution. This quote from Justice Hernando really just perfectly sums up the whole case. It all comes down to trust, a secret trust. Every single peso collected for health needs to be spent on health. It's a simple idea, but it's a powerful one the Supreme Court stood up to defend. So when you step back, yeah, this was about PhilHealth's funds, but it's so much bigger than that. It's a powerful reminder about the separation of powers and about those strict constitutional fences that are built to protect public money. And it leaves us with a really important question. How do we make sure that the money set aside for our most basic needs, like our health, is always, always safe from being used as a political piggy bank?